Darkness. In the distance, a church bell tolls. 3 chimes, then silence. To Blackwood Ridge, population 8427, welcome. A town where everyone knows everyone, where church spires reach higher than any other building, and where secrets hide in plain sight. If you were to visit Blackwood Ridge in the early 2000s, the same name would be heard in every church, regardless of denomination. Methodist, Baptist, Catholic, Episcopal, it didn't matter. Their generosity had touched them all, the Walther family. To Blackwood Ridge in 1992, Alexander and Ella Walther moved. No one knew exactly where they came from. Some said Boston, while others claimed New York. A few whispered about Europe, pointing to the occasional accent of Alexander that slipped through when he was agitated. What everyone did know was that the Walthers were wealthy, enormously so. The old Blackwood estate they purchased, a sprawling Victorian mansion that had stood empty for nearly 2 decades, and a small fortune they spent renovating it. For the renovation, the Walthers employed a small army of workers, but oddly, most were brought in from outside Blackwood Ridge. The few local contractors who worked on the project were only allowed specific areas of the home to renovate. At the time, none were permitted to enter the East Wing. No one thought much of it. After all, rich people are entitled to their eccentricities, and for any peculiarities, the Walthers more than made up with their extraordinary generosity. Within their first year in Blackwood Ridge, $250,000 was donated by the Walthers to St. Mary's Catholic Church for a new roof. 6 months later, a complete renovation of the First Baptist Church's community center was funded by them. By their 3rd year in town, to every single house of worship in Blackwood Ridge and the surrounding areas, they had contributed substantially. Somewhere they attended services every Sunday, though never at the same church twice in a row. For religious causes, they hosted charity events. Mission trips they funded. Through church programs, they paid for summer camps for underprivileged youth. By all appearances, Alexander and Ella Walther were living saints. Everyone loved the Walthers, Margaret says, her wrinkled hands fidgeting in her lap. How could we not? Our historic churches they were saving, our community programs they were funding. Alexander was charming. Ella was gracious. They seemed like the perfect couple. Margaret pauses, her eyes darting away from the camera. But there were always whispers. The first peculiarity that residents of Blackwood Ridge noticed was that despite their active involvement in the community, events were never hosted by the Walthers at their home. Always at churches or community centers, charity functions were held. Even the most prominent citizens of Blackwood Ridge had never set foot inside the Walther mansion. The staff was the second peculiarity. A significant household staff was employed by the Walthers, all from outside Blackwood Ridge. On the property, these employees lived and rarely ventured into town. When they did, to themselves they kept and deflected questions about their employers. But the third peculiarity, the one that sparked the most gossip, involved the children. When they arrived in Blackwood Ridge, the Walthers brought 5 children with them, 3 boys and 2 girls. The local schools were attended by none of them. They were homeschooled, the Walthers claimed. During the first year, the children were occasionally seen in town. Always with either Alexander or Ella, never alone, never with local children. And then sometime during the second year, in public altogether, the children stopped appearing. People asked questions, of course, Margaret continues. The same answer Ella always had. On their studies, the children were focused. They were gifted, she said. Specialized education they needed. For educational opportunities, Alexander would add that they traveled frequently. Plausible it seemed. After all, they were wealthy. The best for their children they could afford. Margaret leans forward, her voice dropping to nearly a whisper. But some of us wondered if the same children we ever actually saw twice. Something not quite right there was. Their eyes. Something in their eyes wasn't right. What no one in Blackwood Ridge knew then was that into something entirely different from the rest of the house, the east wing of the Walther mansion had been transformed. While the main portion of the mansion featured restored Victorian splendor, the east wing had been gutted and rebuilt with modern materials, soundproofed walls, security cameras, reinforced doors with electronic locks, and windows that from the outside looked like normal glass, but from a specialized material that prevented anyone from seeing in or out were actually made. This is where our story truly begins, with Rebecca Chen, a journalist for the Boston Herald, who arrived in Blackwood Ridge in the fall of 2003 to write what she thought would be a simple human interest story about small-town religious philanthropy. About the Walthers, Rebecca had been assigned to write as part of a series on modern philanthropists. To her, a folder containing newspaper clippings about the family's donations to religious institutions across New England had been handed by her editor. A straightforward assignment it seemed. Interview the generous couple, take some photos, a heartwarming piece about faith and charity right. In and out of Blackwood Ridge in 2 days, she expected to be. For 6 months, she would end up staying. That this story might be more complicated than she anticipated, Rebecca's first indication came within hours of her arrival in Blackwood Ridge. After checking into the Blackwood Inn, to the proprietor, Martha Keene, she mentioned that she was in town to interview the Walters. "Good luck with that," Martha said with a tight smile. "Interviews the Walthers don't do." An appointment she had, Rebecca explained. Through the Walthers' representative, her editor had arranged it. "Well, that's a first," Martha replied. "Here been 11 years, and to talk to reporters, I've never known them." When Rebecca pressed for more information, oddly reticent Martha became. "Good people they are," she said finally. "Very generous, very private. That's all anyone needs to know." That afternoon walking through Blackwood Ridge, Rebecca spent, noting the immaculate condition of every church she passed. To several locals, she spoke, all of whom echoed Martha's assessment. Generous the Walthers were. Private the Walthers were. Good Christians who preferred to keep to themselves, the Walthers were. At St. Patrick's, Rebecca met Father Thomas Riley, a priest in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes. Unlike the others Rebecca had spoken to, the Walthers' praises Father Riley didn't immediately sing. "A blessing their generosity has been," he said carefully. "But that true charity isn't measured by dollar amounts, I've always believed." When Rebecca asked what he meant, Father Riley hesitated. "A priest for nearly 40 years I've been, Miss Chen. About people, my instincts to trust I've learned. And something about the Walthers has never felt right to me." "In what way?" Rebecca asked. His head Father Riley shook. "On it, my finger I can't put. Perhaps it's nothing, but about those children I've always wondered. Their children. 5 children with them they brought when they moved here. Beautiful children. At Mass occasionally I used to see them during the Walthers' first year here. Then nothing. About them, I asked Ella Lehner once. A private boarding school in Europe they were attending, she said. But what, Father?" Troubled Father Riley looked. "A boy about 2 years ago at the mansion I saw. Driving past I was in him looking out a window in the east wing I saw, just for a moment before a curtain was pulled shut. Like a child who was away at boarding school in Europe, he didn't look. A different child it could have been. A relative visiting perhaps. Perhaps, Father Riley conceded. But on that child's face, the look. Sometimes I still think about it. Frightened he looked. On 20 acres of wooded land at the edge of town, the Walther mansion sat. The property was surrounded by a tall iron fence with a gate that was supposedly always closed to uninvited visitors. But for her scheduled interview as Rebecca approached, automatically the gate swung open. Up a long winding driveway lined with ancient oak trees, she drove, their branches forming a canopy overhead. Gradually into view, the mansion came. A massive Victorian structure with a distinctive tower at one corner and 2 wings extending from the main building like arms reaching outward. Different from the rest of the house, the east wing looked. While the main building and west wing featured ornate Victorian details, the east wing appeared plainer, more modern somehow. The same shape as those in the rest of the house were the windows, but light differently they reflected. And although to the pleasant fall air, several windows in the main house were open, every window in the east wing was closed, the curtains drawn. At the door by a tall, thin man, Rebecca was met who introduced himself as Garrett, the Walthers house manager. A precise way of speaking he had that Rebecca couldn't quite place. Not quite an accent, but something deliberate in his enunciation. "In the parlor, Mr. and Mrs. Walther are waiting for you," Garrett said. "Please follow me and please at all times with me stay. Renovation, some areas of the house are undergoing." Through the entrance hall as Rebecca followed Garrett, noting the museum-quality artwork on the walls and the immaculate antique furniture, of a long corridor she caught a glimpse that she presumed led to the east wing. Unlike the rest of the house, which was warmly lit and richly decorated, stark and modern this corridor appeared with recessed lighting and white walls. Before she could get a better look, smoothly into her line of sight Garrett stepped. "This way, Ms. Chen," he said, gesturing toward a different doorway. To greet Rebecca as she entered the parlor, Alexander and Elena Walther rose. Tall and distinguished Alexander was with salt and pepper hair and piercing blue eyes. Petite and elegant Elena was, her blonde hair pulled back in a classic chignon. Impeccably both were dressed in what Rebecca recognized as extremely expensive though conservative clothing. "Miss Chen," Alexander said, extending his hand. "To our home, welcome. Interviews we rarely grant, but about your series on faith-based philanthropy when we heard, a greater purpose it might serve we felt. Our only request," Elena added, "is that on the work you focus, not on us. Merely stewards of the blessings we've received, we are." Pleasantly enough the interview proceeded, with carefully curated anecdotes about their charitable giving the Walters sharing. Eloquently they spoke about the importance of supporting religious institutions, about community and faith. But virtually nothing about themselves Rebecca noticed they revealed, their backgrounds, their careers, how they had accumulated their wealth. And their children they never mentioned. When Rebecca finally asked about their family, a nearly imperceptible tension filled the room. "With children we have been blessed," Eleanor said after a brief pause. "At the moment, away at school they are." "All 5 of them?" Rebecca asked. "From talking to people in town, I understood that 5 children you have." A glance Alexander and Eleanor exchanged. "Over the years, several children in our care we've had," Alexander said carefully. "Some were with us temporarily. Foster situations, you might say. Though all children who have passed through our home to be our family, we consider," Eleanor added smoothly. Before Rebecca could ask a follow-up question, from somewhere deep in the house came a sharp sound. A metallic clang like a heavy door closing. To the doorway, Alexander's eyes darted. "Out now, Garrett will see you, Ms. Chen," he said, rising abruptly. "Another appointment we have." Back through the house as Garrett led Rebecca, deliberately a wrong turn she took, stepping quickly down the corridor she had noticed earlier. "Ms. Chen," Garrett called sharply. To visitors, that area is not open, but enough Rebecca had already seen to confirm her suspicion. To a modern security door with an electronic keypad, the corridor led. Entirely out of place in the Victorian mansion it looked. "My apologies," she said, rejoining Garrett. "The way we came in, I thought that was." Impassive Garrett's expression remained, but cold his eyes were. "A common mistake," he said. "To first-time visitors, the house can be confusing." That evening, Rebecca reviewed her notes from the interview, frustrated by how little substantive information she had gathered. At length about their charitable giving the Walters had spoken, but every question about their personal lives they had deflected. She turned on her laptop and for information about the Walters from before their arrival in Blackwood Ridge began searching. To her surprise, almost nothing she found. No previous addresses, no career information, no records of their charitable giving before 1992. As if before they moved to Blackwood Ridge, Alexander and Eleanor Walther hadn't existed. It was even stranger, no record of their children she could find, no birth announcements, no school records, nothing. Her editor in Boston, Rebecca, called, explaining her concerns. Something doesn't add up, Jim. Millions to churches all over New England these people have donated, but any background on them I can't find. Where they came from or how they made their money, no one in town seems to know. And something strange about their children, or the lack thereof there is. Just private people maybe they are, Jim suggested. On display, their life story not everyone wants. More than that it is, Rebecca insisted. Of their house, this east wing there is that from the rest of the property seems to be sealed off. High security, modern construction in an otherwise historic home. And about their kids when I asked, evasive they got. What are you suggesting, Rebecca? I don't know yet, but in Blackwood Ridge a bit longer I'm going to stay. A story here beyond wealthy couple donates to churches there is. Over the next week, deeper into the Walter mystery Rebecca dug. The town records office she visited, spoke to real estate agents who might have been involved in the mansion sale, and about the enigmatic family continued interviewing locals. The same information most people repeated, the Walthers were generous, private, and kept to themselves. But occasionally something else Rebecca would catch, a hesitation, a glance away, a change in tone when the children were mentioned. Briefly for them I worked when they first moved to town, Sarah Pembroke told Rebecca. They sat in Sarah's small apartment above the town's bookstore. Just for about 3 months, with the children to help I was hired while they settled in. What were the children like? Rebecca asked. Hesitated Sarah. Quiet, very well behaved. Too well behaved, if you know what I mean. Children should laugh, should play, into mischief sometimes should get. These children, afraid to make noise they seemed. Afraid of what? I don't know. Mistreat them I never saw the Walters. But rules there were. So many rules. Certain parts of the house, the children were never to enter. To visitors, they were never to speak. Certain things they were never to mention. What things, Sarah? Away Sarah looked. A non-disclosure agreement I signed. Too much already I've probably said. To forget what I saw, very well they paid me. What did you see? I need to go, Sarah said suddenly. An appointment I have. To talk to you, I shouldn't have agreed. Rebecca's next stop was the Blackwood Ridge Elementary School where she spoke to Diane Lambert, who had been the principal when the Walters arrived in town. Yes, shortly after they moved here, Eleanor Walter came to see me, Diane confirmed. That they would be homeschooling their children, she explained. All the proper documentation she had, curriculum plans, teaching credentials, in order everything was. The children did you ever meet? Just once. For that initial meeting, Eleanor brought them with her. Memorable children they were. In what way? Her words carefully Diane considered. Alike they didn't look. Different hair colors, different features. Yet something similar about them there was. Their manner perhaps. Perfectly still the whole time they stood, like normal children didn't fidget, and constantly Eleanor they watched, as if for signals waiting. Unusual to you did that seem? At the time, just nervous about being in a new place I thought perhaps they were. But looking back, Diane trailed off. Yes. A moment there was, just a brief moment, when to take a phone call Eleanor stepped out. At me the oldest boy looked and opened his mouth as if something he wanted to say. But then returned Eleanor and immediately back to that same blank expression he went. Over the years, about that moment many times I've thought. That evening, past the Walther mansion Rebecca drove, slowing as she approached. Dark was most of the house, but in some windows of the east wing lights were visible. As she watched, at one of the windows a silhouette appeared, small, child-sized. Then another figure, adult-sized, approached, and quickly drawn the curtain was. A short distance away Rebecca parked her car and waited, watching the house. After about 20 minutes, approaching headlights she saw a large black SUV with tinted windows turned into the Walther property. Automatically the gates opened, then closed behind it. Curious, of the time Rebecca made a note, 8:17 p.m. Back at the inn, of everything she had learned so far Rebecca created a timeline. In 1992 in Blackwood Ridge the Walthers had appeared with 5 children. During the first year occasionally the children had been seen, then from public view disappeared. Various explanations had been given: homeschooling, boarding school abroad, specialized education programs. But about the children's whereabouts, concrete information no one in town seemed to have. And of any Walther children attending any boarding schools in Europe or elsewhere, records Rebecca had found no. What she did find when she expanded her search were scattered reports from other small towns across the country. Reports of a wealthy couple with different names but similar descriptions who had appeared suddenly, made generous donations to local churches, and then after a few years disappeared. Children each report mentioned, though the numbers varied. The Prestons, said Detective Michael Ramirez of the Boulder Police Department. From 1987 to 1991, Curtis and Evelyn Preston lived here. A fortune to local churches they donated, had 4 children, supposedly after questions were raised about the children's welfare, suddenly left town. By the time a formal investigation was launched, without a trace they were gone. And the Prestons might be the Walthers you think? Rebecca asked. For certain without seeing them I can't say, Detective Ramirez replied. But the pattern matches and the timing works. From here right before your Walthers appeared in Massachusetts, they disappeared. Hours at the town records office Rebecca spent searching for any documentation related to the Walthers' arrival in Blackwood Ridge. The property purchase record she found. For cash through a shell company called Providential Holdings, the mansion had been bought. To a P.O. box in Delaware, the company's listed address led. Based on what you've described, Dr. Morgan said, about these children I would be concerned. The extreme isolation, the rigid behavioral control, over the years the rotating cast of children. Red flags these are all. What do you think could be happening? Rebecca asked. Grave Dr. Morgan's expression was. Best case scenario, some form of extreme religious homeschooling situation where from worldly influences the children are being kept. Worst case, for child trafficking or abuse, there are unfortunately people who use religious charity as a cover. The security measures in the East Wing would that explain? It might. Also explain why different children have been seen over the years. It could if through the home they're moving children rather than the same children continuously raising. From journalism into something else entirely Rebecca knew she was crossing a line. But at stake was the welfare of children. On a secluded road that ran behind the Walther property Rebecca parked her car and through the woods toward the mansion made her way. Nearly full the moon was, providing just enough light for her to navigate without a flashlight. A small digital camera with night vision capabilities she carried. Not professional-grade equipment, but anything she might see to document enough. As she approached the property line, the security fence she spotted. Tall it was, at least 10 feet, with pointed tips at the top. Not impossible to climb, but certainly a deterrent. More concerning were the small devices mounted at intervals along the fence. Motion sensors or cameras, Rebecca guessed. The fence line she followed, for any weak points or blind spots looking. About a quarter mile from where she had started, what she was looking for she found. During a recent storm, a large tree had fallen against the fence, partially crushing it and a gap just large enough for a person to squeeze through creating. Heart pounding, onto the Walther property Rebecca made her way. Within the tree line she stayed, working her way gradually toward the east wing of the mansion. As she got closer, that the architectural style of the east wing was indeed different from the rest of the house she could see, more modern, more institutional somehow. And the windows, now that she could see them up close, clearly not standard glass they were. A slight greenish tint they had and much thicker than normal windows appeared to be, security glass perhaps, designed to be shatterproof. Behind a large shrub about 50 feet from the east wing Rebecca crouched, watching and waiting. For nearly an hour, nothing happened. Then suddenly, in a ground floor room a light came on. Through the window, a sparse institutional-looking space Rebecca could see, more like a hospital room than a bedroom, white walls, simple furniture bolted to the floor. A door in the room opened and a child entered. A boy of perhaps 8 or 9. By a woman in what looked like a nurse's uniform he was followed. Toward the bed the woman gestured and in the boy climbed. Something on a clipboard the woman checked, then left the room, closing the door behind her. Motionless on the edge of the bed the boy sat for several long moments. Then slowly, toward the window he turned. Rebecca's breath caught. Right at her the boy was looking, or at least in her direction. If in the darkness outside he could actually see her, she couldn't tell. Carefully, her camera she raised and several photos took. Toward the window the boy continued to stare. Then, slowly, deliberately, his hand he raised and flat against the glass placed it. A chill run through her Rebecca felt. A cry for help was this? Her own hand she raised instinctively, from her hiding place the boy's gesture mirroring. Suddenly, to one of alarm the boy's expression changed just as the door to his room opened again. Returned the woman in the nurse's uniform, accompanied by a man Rebecca hadn't seen before, tall with a shaved head and the build of a security guard. Straight to the window the man went, the darkness outside scanning. Lower behind the shrub Rebecca pressed herself, hardly daring to breathe. After what seemed like an eternity, from the window the man stepped back. Something to the boy he said, who vigorously his head shook. Threatening the man's posture became. Over the child he towered, pointing his finger and speaking forcefully. On the bed the boy cowered. Enough Rebecca had seen. For these children, help she needed to get. Carefully, from her hiding spot she began to back away. And then on a dry branch her foot came down. In the quiet night, deafening the crack seemed. Immediately toward the sound the man at the window turned. Urgently to the nurse he spoke who rushed from the room. Moments later, the grounds around the east wing floodlights illuminated. Ran Rebecca, crashing through the underbrush, no longer concerned about stealth. Behind her, voices calling out she could hear, flashlight beams through the trees sweeping. To the damaged section of fence she made it and squeezed through, tearing her jacket in the process. Running she didn't stop until her car she reached. With shaking hands, her car Rebecca started and drove away, constantly checking her rearview mirror for signs of pursuit. When she was certain she wasn't being followed, over to examine the photos she had taken she pulled. Grainy the images were, but clear enough to show the institutional nature of the room, the boy's solemn face, his hand pressed against the glass. Not conclusive evidence of wrongdoing perhaps, but certainly supporting her suspicions that at the Walther mansion something wasn't right. With Detective Ramirez I need to speak, Rebecca said. Urgent it is. About the Preston case, him it's Rebecca Chen calling tell. While she waited on hold, from her camera to her laptop Rebecca transferred the photos and copies to her own email account and to her editor in Boston sent. Miss Chen, through the line Detective Ramirez's voice came. About the Prestons, new information do you have? What she had discovered in Blackwood Ridge and what she had witnessed at the Walther mansion Rebecca quickly explained. The Walthers are the Prestons I believe, she concluded. And in some kind of secured facility in the east wing of their mansion, children they're holding I believe. The same children they arrived with or new ones, I don't know if it's, but very wrong something is. Local authorities have you contacted? Ramirez asked. Not yet. More evidence first I wanted to gather, and frankly, who to trust I'm not sure. Significant amounts to local organizations the Walters have donated, including the police department's community outreach programs. Careful you need to be, Miss Chen. If these are the same people I investigated years ago, resources and connections they have, and ahead of law enforcement for a long time they've managed to stay. What should I do? Everything document, your case carefully build, and your back watch. Your help I need, Father, Rebecca said. They sat in Father Riley's office, a modest room lined with theological books. Against their will at the Walther mansion, children are being held, I believe. Troubled Father Riley looked. A serious accusation, that is, Miss Chen. The photo she had taken Rebecca showed him. The Walthers' background I've been researching. Out of nowhere in Blackwood Ridge in 1992 they appeared. Before that, in Boulder, Colorado, a couple matching their description was, using different names. Before that, possibly other locations. Always the same pattern. Generous donations to churches, children who are rarely seen in public, when questions are raised, sudden departures. If what you're suggesting is true, so generously to churches, why would they donate? What would be the purpose? Cover, I think it is, Rebecca said. Child abusers who support every church in town who would suspect. Goodwill they buy. As pillars of the community they establish themselves. Above suspicion they make themselves. Again the photos Father Riley studied. The boy in this image. Familiar, something about him seems. Up at Rebecca he looked. From me, what do you need? From the community, someone who for me can vouch. If to the authorities I go. Someone respected whose word carries weight. Slowly Father Riley nodded. If in danger children are, a moral obligation to act we have. I'll help. Skeptical Chief William Cooper was. The photos Rebecca had taken he examined and to her explanation listened, his expression growing increasingly dubious. This straight let me get, he said when she had finished. The Walthers you're accusing, who to this community millions have donated, who our new community center funded, who for our youth programs pay, of being child abusers or traffickers based on some grainy photos taken while on their property you were trespassing. How it sounds I understand, Rebecca admitted. But too many unanswered questions there are. Where did the Walthers come from? Where did their money come from? What to the children they arrived with happened? Why, like a prison, the east wing of their home is secured? Private people the Walthers are, Chief Cooper said. A crime being private isn't. On your property having security isn't a crime. As for their backgrounds, their business dealings, confidential, wealthy people often prefer to keep. Will, Father Riley interjected. About the Walthers for years, my own concerns I've had. Right, something isn't. Into it at least look. Sighed Chief Cooper. Discreetly some inquiries I'll make, but that's all I can promise. As they left the police station, a sense of unease Rebecca felt. Anything he's not going to do, is he? A good man Will Cooper is, Father Riley said. But to this town very good the Walthers have been. About people who have done so much good, the worst to believe it's difficult. Exactly what they count on, that is, Rebecca replied. As Rebecca approached the Blackwood Inn, a black SUV parked across the street. She noticed, the same type of vehicle she had seen entering the Walther property. In the driver's seat a man sat, watching the inn. Past the inn Rebecca walked, continuing down the street as if heading elsewhere. Her phone she took out and pretended to make a call, using the opportunity to snap a photo of the SUV and its license plate. She then doubled back, through a side door entering the inn. Once inside, straight to her room she went and packing her belongings began. If on their property the Walthers knew she had been, where she was staying they might also know. At the inn anymore, safe she didn't feel. Into the Pine Grove Motel Rebecca checked, 20 miles from Blackwood Ridge. Cash she paid and a fake name used. Journalistic ethics be damned. First came her safety. In her motel room, her laptop she set up and her investigation continued. The license plate she had photographed through a database her newspaper had access to she ran. To a company called Sentinel Security Services, the SUV was registered, a private security firm based in Boston. Further research revealed that in high-value asset protection Sentinel specialized and employed many former military and law enforcement personnel. Their client list was not public, but that the Walthers might employ such a firm, not a stretch it was to imagine. "Jim, more resources I need," Rebecca said. Then I thought, bigger this story is. Part of some kind of organization that from town to town moves, using religious philanthropy as cover for something involving children. I believe the Walthers are. What kind of resources are we talking about? A researcher to dig deeper into the Walthers' past I need, not just Boulder, but before that. And someone to look into Providential Holdings and Sentinel Security Services I need. Plus, on the ground here another reporter I could use. Watched I think I'm being. Then a newspaper story, more like a police matter this sounds, Rebecca. The police I've tried. Not convinced they are. And even if they were, connections the Walthers have. Of an official investigation if they get wind, with the children again they might disappear. Sighed Jim. All right. To help you Jake I'll send, and on research Maria I'll put. But Rebecca, careful be. If as dangerous as you think these people are, unnecessary risks don't take. Over the next week, deeper into the Walther mystery Rebecca and her colleague Jake dug. 3 more locations they identified where a couple matching the Walthers' description had lived under different names: Spokane, Washington, 1983 to 1987, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 1979 to 1983, and Savannah, Georgia, 1975 to 1979. In each location, the same pattern was: sudden appearance, generous religious donations, questions about children, sudden departure. Meanwhile, disturbing information about Providential Holdings Maria uncovered. To a network of similar shell corporations the company was connected, all ultimately linked to an entity called the New Dawn Foundation, a supposedly religious organization with no public-facing presence. For them in Tulsa I worked, Patricia Lawson confirmed. The Marshalls then they called themselves, Gregory and Catherine Marshall. Same pattern. Big donations to churches, very private about their home life. 6 months as their housekeeper I lasted before I quit. Why did you quit? Rebecca asked. Darkened Patricia's expression. The children. Wrong something about the whole situation was. 3 children then they had, or at least in the house while I worked there 3 were living. But belonging to other children items I found. Clothing, toys, personal items with different names. Specifically what made you leave? One night, from the basement crying I heard. Down there I wasn't supposed to go. To household staff strictly off limits it was, but a child's cries I couldn't ignore. When downstairs I went, in a small room a little girl locked I found. Terrified she was, for her mother begging. What did you do? To Gregory immediately I went, Mr. Marshall. Troubled the girl was he told me, that specialized care for her they were providing, that the situation I had misunderstood. A significant bonus to forget what I had seen he offered me. The money I took. At the time I needed it, but the next day notice I gave. Of whatever they were doing, part 1 couldn't be. To authorities what you saw did you report? Ashamed Patricia looked. No, afraid I was. Throughout the community with connections, powerful people they were. And when I said I was leaving, at me the way Gregory looked, dangerous he was I knew. So, around the country for at least 30 years moving a couple we have, Jake summarized. Different names, different locations, but always the same pattern. Always children involved. Always religious philanthropy as their public face. Always about what happens to the children questions, Rebecca added. Children who appear then disappear. Children who are kept isolated, who afraid seem. The question is, with these children what are they doing, and why? Rebecca's phone rang. From Boston calling Maria it was. Something I found, Maria said without preamble. The New Dawn Foundation. As a religious organization it's registered, but almost no public information about it there is. However, from a case in the early 1970s some sealed court records I managed to access. What kind of case? A custody dispute. Anna Walter, a woman named, possibly a relative of your Alexander Walther, with a religious group called the Children of the New Dawn was involved. Her own children she took and from the group fled, then of other children still in the community custody tried to get. Ultimately dismissed the case was, and at the request of the Children of the New Dawn's lawyers, the records were sealed. Everything you found can you send me? Already did. Your email check. Over the documents Maria had sent Rebecca poured. In the late 1960s by a man named Elias Shepard founded, the Children of the New Dawn had been a small religious community. That specially chosen children, vessels, they called them, in an approaching religious awakening a crucial role would play, the group believed. According to Anna Walthers' testimony, from outside the community the group had begun taking in children, orphans, foster children, even from desperate families in impoverished areas purchasing children. From the community's own children separate these children were kept and to what Anna described as preparation rituals for their role as vessels subjected. When some of these children Anna had attempted to rescue, with accusations that she was mentally unstable the group had countered. The case had been dismissed and shortly afterward Anna had disappeared. My God, Rebecca murmured. If from law enforcement the Walthers aren't running? If from this cult they're trying to rescue children? Or... Grimly Jake suggested, what if still part of it they are? What if the work of the Children of the New Dawn they're continuing, just in a more decentralized way? From town to town move, use religious philanthropy as cover. Gather children, then before anyone gets suspicious move on. Of a group called the Children of the New Dawn, have you ever heard? Rebecca asked when Ramirez answered. A long silence on the line there was. Then, where did you hear that name? What Maria had found Rebecca explained. Rumors there were, Ramirez said finally. Nothing concrete, nothing we could prove. But when the Prestons, your Walters, we were investigating, some witnesses mentioned religious teachings that with mainstream Christianity didn't align. To vessels and preparation references. To a specific group any direct connection we could never find. To the Children of the New Dawn what happened? Do they still exist? Officially, after a series of investigations into child welfare concerns in the mid-1970s they disbanded, but over the years about splinter groups continuing the work whispers there have been. Nothing confirmed. Inside that East Wing we need to get, Rebecca said. Of what's happening to those children, concrete evidence we need. Too tight the security is, Jake pointed out. And after your previous attempt, on high alert probably they are. Then leverage we need. Something to force them to let us in or to bring in authorities who off can't be bought or intimidated. As they watched, from the gates of the Walther property a familiar black SUV emerged. The same vehicle that was watching thee and that is, Rebecca said. It follow, but your distance keep. To St. Mary's Catholic Church the SUV led them where a charity event was being held. Among the attendees Rebecca recognized Alexander and Elena Walther, with local dignitaries mingling. Both here they are, she whispered to Jake. Into the mansion to get, our chance this might be. Are you crazy? Even if past the gate and the security system we could get, staff the place will still be. Not necessarily the East Wing. From what we've gathered, only certain staff members in that section are allowed. At this event with the Walters, reduced the security might be. Incredulously at her Jake looked. Into the mansion break you're really suggesting. That's not journalism, Rebecca. That's burglary. About a story anymore it's not, Rebecca replied. About those children it is. Your help again I need, Father, Rebecca said urgently. At the event occupied the Walters to keep I need you. As long as possible make sure they stay. Troubled Father Riley looked. What are you planning, Miss Chen? The less you know, the better. Just me trust. For the children it is. After a moment's hesitation, Father Riley nodded. What I can I'll do, but please careful be. The same damaged section of fence that Rebecca had found before they used, though that repairs had begun she noted. Another few days and sealed this entry point would be. This time more cautiously through the woods they moved, staying low and any dry branches or leaves that might betray their presence avoiding. As they approached the house, that fewer lights on than before there were they could see. Empty the main house looks, Jake whispered. But in the east wing lights there are. To a side door that connected the main house to the east wing they made their way, the modern security door with the keypad that Rebecca during her tour had glimpsed. Now what? Jake asked. An electronic lock we can't hack. The door Rebecca studied. The lock we don't need to hack. A small sign beside the door she pointed to. Emergency exit only. Alarm will sound. That's not helping us, Jake said. An alarm we don't want to trigger. No, but something important it tells us. From the east wing into the main house this is an emergency exit. That on the inside a mechanical release means there is. Fire safety regulations would require it. Into the east wing another way just need to find we. Then to access the main house if necessary this door we can use. Around the building they continued, close to the walls staying to avoid the security cameras. At the rear of the east wing, what they were looking for they found, a delivery entrance with a loading dock. Often less security service entrances have, Rebecca whispered. Efficiently deliveries need to be made. Both an electronic keypad and a conventional lock the door had. Closely it Rebecca examined. The keypad I can't bypass, but maybe. Into her bag she reached and a small case containing lockpicks pulled out, a questionable tool for a journalist to carry, but one that in her investigative work before useful had proven. After several tense minutes, open the lock clicked. The alarm, Jake whispered. About 30 seconds if we triggered anything we'll know in, Rebecca replied, carefully opening the door. They waited, hardly breathing. No siren sounded. No flashing lights appeared. Clear I think we are, Rebecca said. For entering from the outside the electronic lock must be. From the inside when opened, an alarm it doesn't trigger. And the mechanical lock I bypassed. Nothing like the ornate Victorian decor of the main house, the interior of the east wing was. Here institutional white the walls were painted, the floors covered in linoleum, the lighting harsh and fluorescent. Cautiously down the corridor they moved, passing what looked like storage rooms and offices. Through one open door, what appeared to be medical equipment Rebecca glimpsed, an examination table, monitoring devices, cabinets of supplies. What is this place? Jake whispered. A hospital or a lab it looks like. At the end of the corridor, to a set of double doors with small windows they came. Through the windows, another corridor with doors along both sides they could see. Doors with small windows and what appeared to be names or numbers on them. The handle Rebecca tried, locked. But next to the doors on the wall hanging was a clipboard. Down it she took and examined it. A schedule it is, she whispered. Look, medications, treatments, sessions, and names. Vessel 12, Vessel 17, Vessel 23. Vessels, Jake repeated. Like in those court documents. Through the windows again Rebecca looked. Rooms those are. In those rooms kept, the children are I think. Her phone she took out and the clipboard pages began photographing. Through these doors we need to get, she said. To those children what's happening, we need to see. Before Jake could respond, from somewhere nearby voices they heard, coming closer. Hide, Rebecca hissed, pulling Jake into the nearest room, what appeared to be a supply closet. Through the partially opened door, as two people in scrubs walked past they watched, deep in conversation. The latest batch of results, one was saying. With the progress, Dr. Shepard is pleased. Resistance Vessel 17 is still showing, the other replied. Helped hasn't the increased dosage. Then a different approach we'll try. With Vessel 12 worked cognitive conditioning. As they moved away down the corridor, their voices faded. Dr. Shepard, Jake whispered. As in Elias Shepard, the founder of the Children of the New Dawn. Into those rooms we need to get, Rebecca said. Exactly what they're doing, we need to see. Out of the supply closet they slipped, and the direction the staff members had gone followed. Around a corner, another door they found. This one with a window that into what appeared to be a control room of sorts looked. Computer monitors displayed feeds from security cameras throughout the facility. And on a wall near the door, several key cards on a rack hung. At Jake, Rebecca looked. "Me cover." Before he could object, the door she opened. Empty the room was. On elsewhere the staff members must have continued. Quickly one of the key cards Rebecca grabbed, then in the corridor Jake rejoined. "Through those double doors this should get us," she said. Their steps they retraced. Worked the key card did. With a soft click the double doors unlocked. A small window in the door each room had, and a label each door had, Vessel 12, Vessel 14, Vessel 17, and so on. Through the window of the first door Rebecca looked. Inside a small, sparse room with a bed, a desk, and a chair was, all bolted to the floor. On the bed sitting was a child, a girl of perhaps 10 with dark hair and vacant eyes. At the wall staring she was, slightly rocking. "My God," Rebecca whispered. Her phone she raised and through the window a photo took. To the next room they moved. Another child, a boy this time, younger, maybe 7 or 8. He too had that same vacant expression, that same listless posture. Room after room, children they found, different ages, different appearances, but all with that same emptiness in their eyes. Some rooms held multiple children. Everything Rebecca photographed. To them, what are they doing? Jake whispered, his voice shaking. In one room, medical equipment they saw, for stands, monitoring devices. On the bed a teenage boy lay, apparently sedated, with tubes from his arms to various machines running. In another room, what looked like a classroom they found, but with disturbing differences. With strange symbols and phrases the walls were covered. The vessel opens to receive, purity brings clarity, the empty vessel awaits filling. On a desk at the front of the room, a book titled The Preparation of Vessels, Protocols and Procedures lay. Quickly several pages Rebecca photographed. "Insane this is," Jake muttered. "Some kind of cult brainwashing facility it's." "Worse than that it is," Rebecca said, her voice tight with horror. At this look. To a page she had photographed she pointed, which something called essence extraction detailed. Some kind of special spiritual essence that can be extracted and harvested these children have they believe. That's why vessels them they call. For what purpose? According to this, for the regeneration of the chosen. Whatever that means. Suddenly, an alarm to sound began. A pulsing, shrill noise that through the corridors echoed. "Discovered we've been," Jake said. "Out now we need to get." Back the way they had come they ran, past the double doors, down the corridor toward the loading dock entrance. But as they rounded a corner, by 2 security guards their path blocked they found. Large men in black uniforms, both carrying weapons. "This way," Rebecca gasped, pulling Jake down a different corridor. In an unfamiliar section of the facility they found themselves. Ahead, the emergency exit door that Rebecca earlier had noticed they saw, the one that to the main house connected. There, she pointed. Open the door Jake pushed and into the ornate entrance hall of the main mansion they burst through. Behind them, in pursuit the guards they could hear. Through the mansion they ran, trying doors, for a way out looking. Locked most were. The front door, Jake suggested. Too obvious. Covered they'll have it. Deeper into the house Rebecca led them, for a side exit or a window they could use looking. In what appeared to be Alexander Walther's study they found themselves, a wood-paneled room lined with books and featuring a large desk. "Another way out look for," Rebecca said, moving toward the windows. To the desk Jake went and drawers opening began. "Rebecca," he called, "this you need to see." In an open drawer, a manila folder labeled, Transition Protocol, lay. Inside were documents detailing procedures for relocating vessels and establishing new collection sites. To move their planning, Jake said. Just like before, when questions start being asked, with the children they disappear. The sound of footsteps in the corridor outside them back into motion spurred. The windows Rebecca tried, locked, with no obvious way to open them. Trapped we are, she said. Open the door to the study burst. 2 security guards entered, weapons drawn. Don't move, one ordered. Your hands where I can see them put. Complied Rebecca and Jake, slowly their hands raising. Phones on the floor now. Their phones on the carpet they placed. One guard his weapon trained on them kept while the other the phones collected. With you Mr. Walther to speak will want, the first guard said. With us both of you come. Any sudden moves and badly this ends. To a room deep in the mansion they were led, a conference room with a long table and several chairs. To sit the guards instructed them, then by the door positions took. After what seemed like an eternity, open the door did and Alexander Walther entered, followed by a man Rebecca didn't recognize, elderly with white hair and piercing blue eyes. Miss Chen, Alexander said, his voice cold. About our charitable work writing an article you or I understood. Into our home breaking that involved I wasn't aware. To those children what are you doing? Rebecca demanded. Them we saw. The vessels we saw, the medical equipment, the brainwashing materials. Forward the elderly man stepped. For a greater purpose than you could possibly understand, the vessels are being prepared. Who are you? Jake asked. Smiled the man, a chilling expression devoid of warmth. My name is Dr. Elias Shepard. Of the Children of the New Dawn, I am the founder. A chill run through her Rebecca felt. Dead you're supposed to be. In the 1970s the group disbanded. Greatly exaggerated reports of my death have been, Shepard replied. As for the Children of the New Dawn, simply more discreet in our operations we became. By kidnapping children, Rebecca's voice shook with anger, by brainwashing them, by whatever sick essence extraction process on them you're performing. Ordinary children the vessels are not, Shepard said calmly. For their unique spiritual qualities they have been chosen. Us their essence sustains, across generations our work to continue allows. At Alexander Walther Rebecca looked. From town to town that's why you move, new children taking, using religious philanthropy as cover. Important the churches are, Alexander replied. Potential vessels identify they help us. Detailed records of their members religious communities keep, especially the children. Because of our generosity us they trust. In particular children, troubled children, orphan children, children with special spiritual gifts, when we express interest, never question they. And when questions people start asking, disappear you, Jake said. The children take and to the next town move, the next set of churches. A necessary precaution, Shepard acknowledged. Though one soon no longer will need. Of our work the culmination we're approaching, the final gathering of vessels. Sick Rebecca felt. Insane you are. All of you. Hardened Shepard's expression. What we are building, you cannot begin to comprehend. For centuries, that human essence can be transferred certain individuals have known, to extend life can be used, to enhance abilities. The ancient Egyptians, the Mayans, certain Eastern mystics, all pieces of this truth discovered. Perfected it we have. Children's lives you're stealing, Rebecca said. Their futures. Their purpose we're fulfilling, Shepard insisted. Through their service, the vessels are honored. His watch Alexander checked. Enough explanation. Underway already the transition is. For transport the vessels are being prepared. With these two what do we do? One of the guards asked. Coldly at Rebecca and Jake Alexander looked. Too much they've seen. Themselves vessels they will become. The continuation their essence will serve. Back to the east wing they were marched, through the sterile corridors to a room containing medical equipment. In scrubs a woman, the nurse Rebecca earlier had seen, syringes was preparing. 2 new arrivals, Alexander told her. Adult specimens. For the initial phase prepare them. With a syringe the nurse nodded and approached. Rebecca tensed, desperately for an opportunity to escape looking. Suddenly, somewhere nearby a commotion erupted, shouting, the sound of running feet. To investigate one of the guards stepped out. Moments later he returned, his expression urgent. Sir, a problem we have. At the main gate police are. Frowned Alexander. How many? Multiple vehicles, and at the rear of the property others there are. To Rebecca Alexander turned. What did you do? Before she could answer, again the facility's alarm system began blaring. In the corridor red emergency lights flashed. Sir, the guard continued, a warrant they have. Impossible, Alexander snapped. Against us in this county no judge would sign a warrant. A local warrant it's not, sir. Federal it is. Paled Alexander's face. To Shepard he turned. Emergency protocols now we need to initiate. Grimly Shepard nodded. For immediate transition the primary vessels prepare. The secondary facilities sanitize. As they spoke, Jake's eye Rebecca caught and slightly toward the door nodded. By the crisis the guards were distracted. If a move they were going to make, now it had to be. In one fluid motion, forward Rebecca lunged, shoving the nurse aside. Simultaneously into one of the guards Jake drove his shoulder, knocking him off balance. For the door they bolted and into the corridor, toward the sound of the commotion running, toward what they hoped was help. Behind them, shouting orders Alexander they could hear, the east wing locked down. In or out no one gets. In chaos the corridors were. In all directions staff members ran, some carrying files, others escorting children. Contradictory orders security guards shouted. Against a wall Rebecca and Jake pressed themselves as a group of guards ran past, then in the opposite direction continued. Beyond escaping and finding the police, no clear plan they had. As they rounded a corner, a familiar face Rebecca spotted. Of the Blackwood Ridge Police Chief Cooper, accompanied by several officers in tactical gear. Chief, she called out. Here. Them Cooper spotted and his officers to move in their direction signaled. Rebecca Chen, he called. All right are you? Okay we are, she replied as they reached the police. But the children moving they are. Stop them you have to. Grimly Cooper nodded. No we. On site already FBI is. For years this group tracking they've been. The break they needed, your evidence was. To federal authorities, the photos you sent to your editor were forwarded. Here Shepard is, Jake said urgently. Elias Shepard, the founder of the cult. To him we just spoke an evidence to destroy their trying, something called, sanitizing the facilities. Into his radio Cooper spoke, relaying the information. Through the facility federal agents in tactical gear swarmed, rooms securing and staff members detaining. To safety Rebecca and Jake were escorted, given medical attention, and by FBI agents debriefed. From outside, as children were led from the building Rebecca watched. Dozens of them, more than she had realized were being held there. With vacant expressions some walked. Others confused, frightened seemed. A few of the older ones relieved appeared, as if they understood they were being rescued. An FBI agent approached Rebecca. Miss Chen, Agent Daniels I am. For your work on this case, you to thank I want. For years the children of the new dawn to locate trying we've been, but ahead of us always stayed they've. Them you get? Rebecca asked. Shepard, the Walthers. Tightened Agent Daniels' expression. Most of the facility and most of the children we secured, but from the east wing an escape route there was, a tunnel leading to a garage with vehicles for rapid departure prepared. And several of the inner circle, including the Walters, with a small number of children managed to get away Shepard. No, Rebecca whispered. After all this, still away they got. Descriptions we have, identities, methods of operation, than we've ever had before, more. For them, in the country every law enforcement agency will be looking. Like this one another operation to establish they won't be able to. But some of the children still they have, Jake said. Yes, Agent Daniels acknowledged, which is why our work isn't done and why with the ongoing investigation your help we'd like. With Agent Daniels Rebecca sat, files and photographs reviewing. Specialized care the children who were rescued are receiving, Daniels explained. In the early stages of the preparation process many were and fully should recover. Longer in the program others have been and more extensive rehabilitation will need. And exactly what was this essence extraction? Rebecca asked. Real was it or just part of their cult beliefs? Sighed Daniels. Real the medical procedures were, though on pseudoscience based. Cerebral spinal fluid and blood from the children they were drawing, with various compounds processing it, and then into Shepherd and other inner circle members injecting the resulting serum. Transfer life essence and extend their lives this would, they genuinely believed. Work did it? Jake asked. 92 years old Shepherd is, Daniels replied. In his 70s he appears to be and of someone much younger the physical capabilities has. Due to their procedures that is or just good genetics. Our medical experts still the data are analyzing. But regardless of whether it worked, abusive, criminal, and horrific it was. Special we were, the girl said quietly, that a greater purpose to serve we had been chosen. At first, well they treated us, like precious we were. But then the preparation began. Compliant us made medications that. 4 hours went on educational sessions, the extractions. Where they might have gone do you know? Rebecca asked gently. Shepherd and the others who escaped. Hesitated the girl. Sometimes about the final gathering place they talked. A name, and mountain somewhere remote I heard them mention. Haven I think it was, or New Haven or something like that. Possible locations in remote mountainous regions we've identified, Agent Daniels said, pointing to several marked areas on a map. On property records connected to shell companies we've linked to the group and information from the rescued children based, they'll have their appearances changed, their names, Rebecca said. But one thing they won't change is their pattern of religious philanthropy. To communities access how they gain, how potential vessels they identify it is. Donations to religious organizations in these regions we're monitoring, Daniels confirmed, for the patterns you identified looking. At a desk Rebecca sat, intensely on her laptop typing. The article she was writing, a human interest piece about philanthropy anymore wouldn't just be of a decades-long criminal enterprise masquerading as religious charity, an exposé it would be. About children stolen from communities that trusted the wrong people it would be. About the darkness that behind a facade of goodness sometimes hides it would be. Montage of headlines. Cult uses church donations as cover for child abuse. Children of the New Dawn, decades of exploitation exposed. Manhunt continues for cult leader and inner circle. The investigation into the children of the New Dawn continues, Rebecca said in her acceptance speech. 17 of the abducted children remain missing. Elias Shepherd and his inner circle, including Alexander and Eleanor Walther, still at large are, but their ability to operate has been severely compromised. Known their identities are. Exposed their methods have been. And most importantly, about what behind those walls in that East Wing happened, the truth finally to light has come. Slowly down the main street of a picturesque town a black SUV drives. A small church it passes where a sign announces a generous donation from the Carroll Family Foundation for a new community center. Inside the vehicle, with dyed hair and colored contact lenses an elderly man, Elias Shepherd, now a new identity using, at the church looks out. Begin again, he says softly. The work continues. This is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental.